You know, I still hear some people carrying on like, if there's trouble with China, then it's our fault or America's fault. Sorry, but China is actually getting very aggressive with most of its neighbours. Japan, for instance, says China's Air Force now sends its planes into Japanese airspace about 2 or 3 times a day, nearly 1,000 times over the past year, to test its air defences. This is making a lot of countries in our region think that we've got a real problem here. You know, India too is thinking this, Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan. And maybe we've got to start joining forces. We've also just sent both of our foreign minister and our defence minister to talks with the US Secretary of State, who said overnight that China was the threat, and he admired Australia's resolve.
The United States commends the Morrison government for standing up for democratic values and the rule of law, despite intense, continued, coercive pressure from the Chinese Communist Party to bow to Beijing's wishes. It is unacceptable for Beijing to use exports or student fees as a cudgel against Australia. We stand with our Australian friends.
And yes, China has been doing that bullying. There's one specific thing from the meeting, a lot of it they never tell you about publicly. There's one specific thing that intrigued me. The US will help build an emergency fuel reserve near Darwin for our joint forces to use if, say, China cuts off our foreign supplies. We're very dependent. And a man who has warned for years that we do need fuel reserves for our security in times of war or other trouble is Liberal Senator Jim Molan, a retired Major General who was once Chief of Operations of all Allied forces in Iraq. I spoke to him a short while ago. Jim Molan, thank you so much indeed for your time. You've been calling for quite a while now for a strategic fuel reserve, probably bigger than what we've just agreed to with America. This one's going to be in Darwin for defence needs. Are you happy with that?
Andrew, I believe that it's certainly better than nothing. It won't be there until it's built and then filled up. And it does complement what the Energy Minister, Minister Taylor, has done in relation to starting the establishment of a crude reserve in the US with $90+ million. Minister Taylor is also very, very much aware of the need that Australia must have its own fuel reserve, not just for the military, but for the nation. So I am always thankful for small mercies, and this is an indication that we're moving in the right direction, but possibly also an indication that the US would be a bit concerned about our ability to provide fuel by truck up the centre of this country into Darwin in a defence emergency.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of the things that came out of this Osman meeting. It must have been something big for our Defence Minister and our Foreign Minister to, despite all the coronavirus scare and all that, to both go over to Washington for these talks. Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, was most enthusiastic and talking up the China threat very strongly. How concerned must America and Australia be for this meeting to have taken place in such a high-profile way?
Well, I think we've both got grounds to be concerned. The Prime Minister came out only 2 weeks ago and announced that he is so concerned with the deterioration or the uncertainty within the strategic environment that he's put $270 billion over the next 10 years into the Australian Defence Force and areas that directly support it. And that kind of leaves the question. I think it's fantastic. I think Linda Reynolds and the Prime Minister have done a great job in getting that up. The strategic update, I think, was something that I never thought that I would see that, Andrew. It is a really seismic change in the way that we consider ourselves and our ability to use force. That is, we're willing and able to use force in our own interests against malign actors in our region. Now, no one mentioned China, and that was a very similar thing in all diplomatic activities, and I don't mind that at all. You've got to play the game in relation to that. But we know why it was being done. And if we then go back and say, well, if the Australian Defence Force needs $270 billion to face the next 10 years, what does the rest of the country need? And we're seeing incredible changes in this country, at least the start of them, Andrew, in manufacturing, in cyber warfare, and in any number of areas. Part of it's come from COVID, part of it's come from health, but we are seeing moving to where I have always hoped we would be, which is a self-reliant country.
Yes, less dependent on China and more aware of our security from Chinese hack attacks. There was one disappointing thing for me, but tell me it's not important, that Mike Pompeo wanted us to sign up aggressively to challenge China's theft of the South China Sea, which is very important to us. A lot of our sea freight comes through this area. China's stolen it, says it's its own. America wants us to go closer and closer to seas now and territory in the sea claimed by China to say, no, this is international shipping zone. We haven't signed up to do that in an aggressive way. Is that a problem for you?
Well, I agree with the first part of your statement, which is that we must call China out for what it's done in the South China Sea. But nothing is going to make China leave those islands. Driving our ships through the area might make us feel good, but I just can't see what it is going to achieve. It might be a statement of the fact that we don't accept their sovereignty over that area, and neither we should. But we've made that statement time and time again. The Chinese will know we don't accept it. And driving our ships within 12 nautical miles of these disputed islands just puts all the options in the hands of the Chinese. And that's what worries me about it. What worries me, Andrew, is the practicality and the purpose of doing it.
Meanwhile, I mean, China aggressively challenges any military aircraft that comes near these islands that it's stolen in the South China Sea. Meanwhile, it has itself challenged Japanese airspace nearly 1,000 times in the past year. More than twice a day, Japan's fighters have to scramble to intercept a Chinese aircraft intruding into their space, a Chinese military aircraft. What on earth is going on there?
Well, I think this is a general attitude that China has towards many of its neighbours. It's picked a fight with India. It's picked a fight with Taiwan. It's always had a fight with Taiwan, and at the moment it's conducting an amphibious exercise in the close proximity to Taiwan, which forced Taiwan to declare a state of military emergency in case that exercise turned into a military action against it and they took one of the islands near the Taiwan Strait. Now, you do these kind of things when you are either just trying to make an annoyance of yourself or you're trying to figure out how good Japanese air defence is. What it is doing is that it's turning so many of the neighbours, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, many of the Southeast Asian nations, the alliance nations that we have, the Japanese, the Americans, the Quad nations, as they call them, Japan, China, Japan, America, and India. They're turning that into a de facto alliance, and I think that is going to be the long-term answer to our problems. We can keep building up individual capability. It's going to cost us a fortune, but one day China will wake up to the fact that it can't take us all on.
Jim Molan, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.